Hello and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host Mike.
And I'm your co-host Alex.
And today we are climbing back into the bunker for Volume 3. And I've noticed that most of these issues have titles. I think all of them, but I want to say I almost said it last time, and then I think there was one that didn't.
Yeah, it seems a little, I don't want to say, a little inconsistent, you know? Yeah. It's not one that necessarily has one every single time. I think you and I that's one of those things that I think you and I both like. It's a little thing that's pretty meaningless, but I like when issues have them.
To me, it adds a certain level of value to a $3.99 issue. I mean, this was probably $2.99 back in the day. It came out, but if you're going to spend $4 on a floppy issue, it feels nice for it to feel like a standalone piece that has its own title.
And that's what I was going to say is it's one thing when you're reading, you know, something from one of the big two and it's part of the story arc and it's the title of that arc, part 1, part 2, part 4, part 5, whatever.
Yeah, even that works for me.
But like, you know, but that's like whatever, because you understand that, oh, these are the issues that are going to be in the eventual trade paperback collection.
Right.
You know, and that's what the title of the trade is going to be, because that's the title of the story arc. I'm fine with that. I agree, though, the idea that there's some intention to your issues, with the idea that every issue should be a complete story. Every issue, even if it's part of an arc, of an overarching story, each issue has to be self-contained. It's the same thing that people talk about with episodes of television, especially now that we live in like a binge drop model in terms of releasing episodes. The idea that every episode should have its own story. Not that it needs to be self-contained, separate from the story, but what happens in that individual installment should have a beginning, middle, and end. Like something should happen in that installment, in that issue, in that episode, even if you get all 6, 8, 12 episodes at one time. You should still get something out of the individual installments. The same thing with when it comes to comics. And so that little added tidbit, little small thing of having a title for it just says that you, the creators, know that this is the story we're telling this month. And we put some thought behind it. Yeah.
Well, and to that point, I think sometimes, I don't think I say it very often on the podcast, although you probably know better than I do because you have to listen to me more than I listen to myself. But sometimes when I read a like standalone 4 or 6 or 12 issue comic series, and I think to myself, this should have been an OGN, it's because not each issue has a story arc of its own.
Yes.
It just feels like chapters in a book. And I think that's what the OGN format's for.
Exactly. Yeah. When you know, Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips says they've moved to that model right there. They're not bound by every 30 pages. We gotta have a break.
Right. Well, you don't need a climax and a resolution.
Yeah, they can go 4 pages,
22
they can
pages.
go 4 pages, have a break. Yes, 8, whatever they want to do, because you're holding the entire thing. And I agree completely that sometimes I think especially with like if you know it's like a planned 4-run series, 4 issue series, miniseries, or whatever you want to call it, you're writing to that. And even if it's an ongoing, oftentimes creators, I think, can sometimes fall into a trap of writing and crafting story to the arcs and sometimes not thinking about the individual issues. You know, they're thinking about breaking points in the story, but they're not thinking about each individual issue at times. And I think I'm with you in that there are times when you can tell. There are times when it stands out.
Yeah.
When you're reading and you're like, yeah, this they thought about this, and when you look at it globally, it's quite possible the story works really well. The story works great as a trade. But if you're reading that individually, month to month, issue to issue, it may not land. The story may not flow as well. It may not land as intended by the creators, because they were thinking about it only globally. They weren't thinking about it individually. It stands out and it's noticeable. I think when it's done, I don't want to say poorly, but when it's done not as well, it's also noticeable when it is done well. I think
Right.
about
When it
something
is
like,
done well, I think those are the series that I keep pulling in single issue. And
yes,
you
yeah,
like a lot of times you hear me say that I trade weight, and some of that is that that's the type of person I am. I'm a trade waiter.
mhm,
But there are times when I'm like, that issue didn't go anywhere, even though I'm still invested in the series. Like these don't strike me as like great standalone issues, but I'll probably love the series. That's
yeah,
when I trade weight.
of course, yeah.
Um, Now, of
I
course, the
think,
backside of that is if everybody were me, they would never make it to trade because no one would ever finish their series
yes,
if everybody stops pulling after the first issue.
yeah, the trades only exist if the single issue sell. I mean, I think Saga is a great example of that, where
Oh my gosh, yeah.
their structure is so rigid that we got 6 issues. May take 10 months for those issues to come out, but no judgment. But it's going to be 6 issues, then there's going to be a trade. It's going to be 6 issues, then a trade, and that is what they do. Meaning that BKV and Fiona Staples, they craft their story that way, and they know we're going to do 6 issues, and there's going to be a break because it's going to be a trade, and then we're going to come back with 6 more the next arc. And so you know that going in, but each issue still feels like it has weight to it, has heft to it. Things happen, and it isn't just setting up for the next issue to get to the end of the arc. There's substantial stuff that happens, and yeah, I think that's an example of when it's done really really well. So, but yeah, but doing something like that, like throwing an episode title, an issue title, I think the most recent one I can think of that we did was probably Unfollow. I think Unfollow had a title for each issue, and then one of those titles ended up being the trade for that arc. I think it was, like they pulled one of the the issue titles and used that as the trade title. But they did that same sort of thing there, where they intentionally put an issue title there. And there's something about it just feels presentational in doing
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're getting into those issues, not
Yeah.
just the names.
Yeah.
But our
We
first
should
one
say
here,
issues 10 through 14. This is
10 to
volume
14.
3 here.
Yes.
Yeah, 10 to 14 here. This is our the third 3 of 4. So the kind of the just past the halfway point here. And should mention off top, because I think we're going to start here. Didn't mention this in the zero. It slipped my mind. It wasn't in my notes. Look past it, but issue 14 here, not drawn by series regular and co-creator Joe Infurnari. Issue 14 was drawn by Brahm Revel. That's how I'm going with it. Could be Revel, I don't know, but drawn by him and colored by Jason Fischer. And it's very noticeable. Obviously, if you look at the art, it's incredibly different. It's much more. It's bolder. It's not really kind of desaturated and washed out in that. But it's also from a story standpoint. It's a completely different setting and characters. It's an interstitial story. We jump into the future that our main cast of 5 characters are responsible for creating. Grady has just become president. There's a massive drought on. We're following 2 farmers who are struggling to kind of go by. And this is like the introduction of the Aspire crops, the ones that Daniel had been working on. So this is like the world has gone to crap. And this is their attempt to try to save the world, which we as the reader know leads to the eventual ending of the world, even though things don't appear to be that great when they started.
Right. I think what works about the whole premise of this issue is that the art is totally different, but it's not the artist trying to draw our regular characters, except for Grady
Oh,
on
yeah.
a TV. Like,
Yeah.
it can be it can throw you off when you're in a series like this. And I think Revival did that, where there were a couple guest artists, and the way the regular characters looked a little different for a couple issues, and that happens.
Yeah, and I think it's a mistake when you bring in a guest artist to have them try to mimic the series regular style, unless there's intention to it, unless that stands out and is different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think in the case of Revival, they probably just needed the help because
Well,
that was
yeah,
a
yeah,
breakneck
yeah,
pace. So it's like no shade at people who do it, but I love when you're even if the case here was artist needs a break, let's do an interstitial.
hmm
Um, I think that was a great move.
yeah.
Um,
And
and
yeah,
what
I'm
I
with you. I have no problem with the different art. It's not jarring. I mean, I understand why it can be jarring, but like that sort of thing, I always read as whether there's intention there, even if that intention is our artist needs a break. We need to bring someone else in. Hey, we just have a different story to tell. Let's just bring someone else in. Let them do their style. And let's not force our world onto them. Let them bring what they do as an artist into our story because we're just telling a totally different, we're in a completely different time period, following different characters. So they clearly don't mind that it stands out. So why not let it? Why not let it be its own thing? I love stuff like that, and I think that's one of those things you get out of comics that we started this episode talking about comparison to television. There are times when you can bring in guest directors or cinematographers or things like that for like a quote unquote very special episode of something.
right.
And sometimes it goes well, and sometimes it feels incredibly jarring if they're using kind of different camera tricks and angles and just the visual looks off. Because obviously the actors are still there. They're going to look the same. They're going to be dressed the same, makeup the same, so, but the way a shot could be framed, the way scenes can be staged, if it's too radically different, that can sometimes feel very jarring and kind of take you out of the story. With comics, I see that as a bonus. I see that as a feature, not a bug of the medium.
Yeah, it's a value add for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the substance of this issue, though, is two characters I assume we'll never see again. Perhaps you do another interstitial later. I think the nature of it is a one and done, just to give you a glimpse into the future, show you what the future looks like.
Yeah.
Um, and I assume you had the same Leo pointing at the screen moment I did in this issue.
What the?
What they've got the TV on in the background and
Oh
Back to the
yeah.
Future is on TV. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I almost made the whistle noise. It's just because like I loved it as validation of my theory of the time travel being employed here. It could also be a red herring.
It could
Um,
be. It could be. It could
but
be.
I took it
Well,
as a little like, in case you
oh,
have not yet caught on,
yeah.
this is
Well,
what we're doing.
and I think it's specifically relevant to this volume because there's not a lot of big thematic things in this volume. There's a lot of plot, a lot of story. But the one thing we do get is multiple characters saying this didn't happen. You know, we know this didn't happen this way. We have changed things now. Starting with older
Well,
Grady
yeah.
talking,
I mean,
talking,
we'll
being
get to
like,
that
well,
because
well,
this is the prime timeline we're witnessing here, right? This is the one that future Grady has left,
yes,
is my
yes.
assumption.
Issue 14. The
Issue
understanding is
10.
that is what. No, issue 14 is the interstitial issue, the last issue.
Oh, did I number them wrong in my notes?
You might have, yes.
I issued number 10. No, we're reading 10 through 14. I thought the interstitial was first.
Interstitial is last.
Oh, I've got it as issue 10 here. Wow. Okay. I may have
Let
just
me double,
scrambled the
hold on.
order.
Let me double check here. Unless we're reading different, that would
That would
be
be wild.
fascinating.
Um, yeah. Well, and
Hold
that
on
would
here. Hold
be
on. Let's double check here. Let's.
fair enough. Fair enough. That would be three-quarters of the way through the series to introduce an interstitial, which is wild to me.
Oh yeah,
But
interesting. Yeah, it is. It is marked as issue 10.
are you reading a trade?
I am reading the trade. I'm reading the trade digitally.
Oh, yeah. So they
I'm
stuck it
reading
in
the
the
trade.
back. That little
Yeah.
editorial choice on the
Well, but even though on the title page it says chapter 14 illustrated by Brahm
the
Revel.
title page of the single issue has a 10 right next to the logo of the bunker. Um, and if you look at like mycomicshop.com,
Yeah, I'm
go
looking
to
now.
number 10, it says the future's in bad shape. Droughts have made things even worse.
Yeah, no,
The one couple
I'm
in the
looking
Midwest,
I'm
everything
looking at
hinges.
Comic
Yeah.
Geeks. Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, but I think that's an interesting tell. from the authors that
no,
when
no,
they
no,
put
no,
it
no.
into trade
Yeah,
that
no,
they
hold on.
rearranged
Let's
it.
that obviously wasn't in either of our notes because that
Well,
radically changes. That radically changes how you think about this issue. If
well,
you
that's
read
the
it
order I
before,
read it in. I
yeah,
read this as 10.
and I've only ever read the trades. I've always read it at the end of this trade.
That's
Okay,
interesting.
now that is super interesting now because you're right. If
Well, now we got to get
if
him
you
on the podcast to talk to us about
if
that
you
change.
read this, if you read this in publication or as it says, issue 10 is our interstitial, then you're right. You're primed with Back to the Future. That's in your mind, and then you go into what you see in the rest of the issue, which is them talking about things like the big thing I think is the second explosion, the one that the one that stopped, the one that puts him in jail, the one that according to the future selves happened. Right,
Right.
it's a massive, it's a much bigger explosion than the one in San Francisco. It's down in L.A. It takes them out, and that's what lands Billy in jail because he, I guess, goes rogue and disarms it. He pulls the wires out and he gets arrested for it. And Grady slinks off. And so that second explosion never happens. But then one, I guess, could argue to be like, well, there's never a second explosion. This is how it was always supposed to happen. Much like how when older Grady is talking to younger Grady, when he's like on the phone, he's like, "Hey, you can't do this debate." And young Grady's like, "Well, why not?"
Okay.
He's like,
Well,
"Well,
now I
because
have a
it
note
never
about that
happened."
as well.
Because
Yes. But
it never
here, the
happened.
problem,
And then he
obviously,
forces
is
him. He
everything
forces
is
him to not
different.
have it. Yes.
Everything is different. So don't have the debate because I didn't. That does not
Yes.
hold up logically.
No,
But
it
young
does
Grady
not.
is so in on this.
Yeah. Well, it, I, I, I agree. I have a hard time characterizing Grady because clearly he is going along with everything older Grady says, but the way it's presented is that he's doing it begrudgingly. Like he feels like he has no choice, which I guess ultimately doesn't really matter. If he's going along with it, he's going along with it, right?
Yes.
But the way it's presented with some of the, especially with some of the art and the paneling, when there's like a solo shot on him, no text on in that panel, we see that it appears he's struggling with it. But in the end, he, as far as we know, has sided with older Grady for is it 3 months? I think that's the timestamp when we come back, right?
Yes.
It's been 3 months on the timeline. So Billy's been in jail for 3 months, and he's been on this track now. Grady's been on this track to, I guess, be elected to Congress, which is his first stepping stone into public office. So for the past 3 months, he has been following everything older Grady says he has been doing, even if he's been kicking and screaming along the way. He's still doing it, which doesn't absolve him of anything. But I think that they do seem to be going out of their way to say that like he's struggling with this.
Yeah. Well, okay. So this is going to shift all of my notes now. All let's say issue 10 or
Or to shift all
14.
of my notes. Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
true. Issue 10 or 14, however you want. I mean, I am going to keep calling it issue 10 because it was issue 10.
No,
It may be
I think we
chapter
should go with issue
14.
and maybe well, I'm looking at it now. It says chapter 14, in the trade. That's so,
Which
but
is
not
why
issue 14.
in the beginning
Yeah.
of issue 11, it notes on the title page. Now, this may be different in trade as well. It says 3 months after issue 9. So it's reminding you that there was a time jump in the
Hold on,
previous
let me-
issue, which is
Let
10.
me hold on. I'm pulling up my trade here
It's yeah,
because now
it's so
this
much
is
slower to do
fascinating.
digitally, hilariously.
I know. Hold on. No. Okay. So as I scroll through here, right, I got title page, the other stuff, the credits pages, and it just says chapter 10, and it says 3 months later. It's a picture of the open bunker. Is that what you have?
Okay, but the page before that is what I'm referring to in single issue.
Okay.
It says the bunker 3 months later. In case you've forgotten, at the end of 9, our dear Billy was taken into custody while Grady hid like a coward, and the bomb turned out to be a dud.
What? There's no recap page.
Yeah, the recap page is in single issues.
There is no,
And
oh, that is fascinating. There is no recap page. So I have a page that says chapter 10, and then I get the enlarged panel of Heidi, see, of Natasha opening door to Heidi. And then the next page is an open bunker. It just says 3 months later. And then we jump to Heidi at the prison trying to talk to her brother, trying to Billy. That's
yeah,
it. No recap page.
well, the
Nothing.
recap page is in every issue. Yeah.
Wow. There are no oh wow. Okay, well, okay. I get why they wouldn't put recap pages in all the issues, but that one specifically, giving the 3 months later, Billy was blah 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 blah. That is
Yeah,
they.
and issue 10 almost works as a standalone issue
It
because
does, yeah. And it can go anywhere. It
the
can go
summary page
anywhere.
of this says, "Welcome to the future. 5 friends discovered that they were the cause of the end of the world. But what about the rest of the world?" Which again, this is
Yeah.
all making me assume issue 10 is on the prime timeline. This is what Grady
Yes.
left behind.
Yes. Yeah.
Old
I
Grady.
100% that I agree on. But
And it still exists because even though this is, I don't believe this is closed loop. Even in like Back to the Future time travel, when they deviate from the main timeline into the Bizarro timeline,
mhm.
the main one still exists. Like all
uh,
those people are still there doing those things. They just can't get back to it. So I guess it
that,
is a matter of what you think exists mean.
yeah, that I think is I think that's up for debate. To the point where I don't know if it matters, because you're right. What matters is the perspective of our time travelers, and they can never return to that. So if they can't return to it, does it exist? Do those people go on without Marty and Doc in their lives? You know,
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe it does. I've honestly never thought of it that way, but this is really blowing my mind now. Why they would decide to change that for the trade, why they would go about that, and I can see arguments
I
for
mean, it
and
almost feels
against
like a
that.
meta thing about the book itself, right? Like
It
they got
does,
to the
yeah.
end of it and they went back and changed it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Because you are right, though. It is completely standalone. And that's obviously the point. The entire point is to do a standalone and just show what it was like. What did old Grady and old Natasha, what did they leave behind to come back in the bunker? But that decision, I think specifically around that Back to the Future thing, because you're right. If it comes at the beginning, before you get into the rest of this, because again, the previous two volumes has been a lot of discussion amongst the characters, amongst the five of them. Well, six if you count old Grady as well. He's been talking around that there's been discussion amongst them about basically what kind of time travel story are we in? What are the rules? We don't know what they are. Can we change things? Is it closed loop? What is happening here? And then by the time we get into the story, which is now I guess issue 11, when we get
Yep.
back into our timeline proper, those discussions aren't happening anymore because they've had 3 months now to live with this. And so if you the reader are presented with that little Easter egg of Back to the Future, now you're primed to think about that versus when it's given to you at the end, it's like, oh, it's a funny nod reading back the other way. You know,
yes.
it has a different effect. And I wonder why this is really breaking my brain here because I'm thinking about because as I've been reading, because I've only read this in trade, I've only read it this way, so I have no other experience to speak of. But the idea of reading this as a binge, right? Because this is if you have the trades, it's how you're reading it to flow directly out of 9 into issue 11 and continue the story, and then end issue 14, which is Heidi confessing to the federal prosecutor, right? The
Right.
federal agent. She ends by writing everything out about the bunker and also drawing a map and trying to deciding that the best course of action is to lay everything out there and expose it all. I mean, that is how you end a story arc, right? If for a story like this, you're going to end with a big bombshell like that. And this is, after this, nothing can be the same, right? Because our little small group of five that are holding this secret, they've now expanded it to someone else. They're telling someone else to say, this is what's going on.
I mean, unless they're just presumed to be crazy. But yes,
Even if they're presumed to be crazy, the idea of
they've
telling
broken the
someone else the truth.
secrecy. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how you end an arc. And it is also the kind of thing you would do, you would think, to initiate the end game of your story, right? That once you do that, you can't put that genie back in the bottle, right? So you have to go towards the end. But to put that there and then give you this interstitial to like give you a breather before the end of the ride comes. I really like that. I really like having that buffer there after that big bombshell versus,
I like the soft entry into the next story because it's a reminder of why Grady's trying to change things. And I presume that this big crop plan that, President Grady is rolling out for them does not work,
well,
which is why he was just like jettison the whole thing.
yes, because if you read some of the background text and the on the digital newspaper or whatnot
With Daniel's
the
quote.
newscast, yeah, exactly. This is the Aspire crop that Daniel's been working on, and we've already see that there's some potential issues over in somewhere in Africa. That there's like signs of protest where that there's already some rumblings that maybe this is not good, but it hasn't come to America yet. But now, because there's this giant famine going on throughout the country, now it's being utilized in America. And you're right. This is what kind of sets the stage for the world to actually end. Because again, world doesn't seem that great already. When Grady takes office, he says it's like his first act or first day of presidency. So like he's just been elected. So the world doesn't look great to start with. It already looks like it's in trouble. And then whatever these guys do, whatever they did with Aspire and these crops, probably just accelerated it towards the end that it was already going to.
Yeah.
But so you've read it this way and you like it as a buffer in between. Is that because there's a time jump there and you read this and then you jump ahead? And
I think
so
it
kind of
felt
sets
like
your mind?
11 through 14 just went like back to back to back so cleanly.
Mhm.
And I came in, there's the 3 month gap between 9 and 11. So that's the perfect place for me to jump way ahead. And then we jump back to the past, but not right where we left off. Like we jump,
Yeah.
like that time is
I
long
see.
gone now. That's 3 months in the past. So
Yeah.
I think that's what I liked about it. And when I finished issue 11, I was like, man, I genuinely love this series because first of all, page 22 is gorgeous. Like I think it's the last or penultimate page of issue 11.
Hold on.
It's with the reflection in the glass.
We're screwed
where
up
you,
now because
well,
your
it'd be
11
it'd be
is it
chapter
my
12 for you.
12 for me. Yeah. Let me go here.
But
Wait.
it's when
Is
old
this-
Grady is visiting in jail, visiting Daniel, and you see Daniel through the glass, but you also see old Grady's reflection in the glass. I just sat there and like marveled over that image for quite some time, thinking like, how did he draw that? Because there's like a penciled transparency to Grady's reflection, and you can see all of Daniel through it. It's really good. It's really good art. In fact, my only wish was that it had been a full splash without the little extra box in the bottom right.
that would have
have
been
you
cool.
located it?
That would have been cool. Yeah, hold on. I'm looking for it here. Hold on. It's when old Grady talks to him.
Yeah, it'd be the end of issue or chapter 12 for you. I think it is the very last page.
Oh wait, okay. So chapter 12 for me is the Heidi issue, right? The one that goes back in time.
I believe that is yes. No, no, no. It'd be
Yeah,
the
that is my chapter 12.
wait. What? The one that keeps messing with time? Like
Yes,
it's like 8 days ago.
Yes, that is my chapter 12.
That's issue
that,
13 for me.
That's chapter 12 for me.
They got
Hold
did
up.
they
Hold
get
up. Wait.
super meta with this?
Wait. Okay. So you have the actual listing, right? Because
Yeah,
you read them
yep.
single issue, right?
Yeah, here's a
Okay.
single issue. Let me tell you
Okay.
the
Well,
description
no,
page for issue 13.
let me tell you mine because mine's out of order. Because clearly mine's out of order. So my volume 3 starts with Heidi going to visit Billy and trying to visit Billy,
Okay.
right? And it is that's when they go about Grady. Old Grady tells young Grady not to not to do the debate. Heidi breaks down and goes to Natasha. They smoke weed and get high with Grady and like talk about their problems. And
Okay,
yeah,
that is
that
issue
is
11 for me.
yeah.
And by the way,
And that's issue. That's the first. I'm here. That's the first issue of volume 3
that
of
would make
the one
sense
you're talking about. I
if
got
you
there now.
skipped issue 10, that would make sense. By the
Yeah.
I do want to talk about that issue a lot.
Okay. All right.
But we can continue with your chronology because
Okay.
then I have the prison issue is what I call issue 12, where it just
Yes.
follows Billy around.
Yes. That is Bill. Yeah, that is Billy. Going about his day, having these nightmares,
Yep.
presumably all these nightmares about trying to end his
Suicidal
life.
ideation.
Yeah. Great stuff in there when they go back and forth between the colored panels and the sketches.
Amazing.
Like
Amazing.
it felt
It's
very
like
take
blue
on me.
pencil, right? It felt
It's
it
well,
like had some blue lines on it.
it's a little blue line, little faint color, but jumping back and forth. That it felt very take on me with that,
Oh
which
yeah,
just visually looked very cool.
that's a good reference. Issue
Issue
13 start then the next one after the prison one
Yes.
is waking up with Heidi in bed.
Yes. Okay. Yes. That is the next. Yes. That is
Okay.
chapter 12 for me, which is the one that keeps going back in time. Which is
Yeah. Okay. So
a
no, I was counting the wrong direction when I
okay.
that's
Okay.
what
Good.
caused all
Right.
this chronology
All right.
problem. Okay.
Okay.
It's
All
not
right.
as crazy as we thought. So
All right.
back to
Good.
what is issue 10 for you?
Yeah. Yeah. The first
Three
issue
months
for me.
after. Yeah.
Yes.
So we already talked about how, everything is different. So don't have the debate because I didn't have the debate, which just doesn't logically make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite page in the entire series is that reflection in the glass. But here's the other thing. Now, old Grady has told Billy about Heidi being molested as a child,
Mm-hmm.
which I gather Billy did not know.
No. Nor did he
Because
know it. Yeah.
Heidi says that no one knew in her letter,
Yes.
which is why she believed it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's told everyone.
Yeah. Well, she's told
everyone
Natasha
in the group now knows. And when they were high, and
Well,
Daniel
I don't think
came
Daniel
in,
knows. Daniel doesn't know.
they said it to Daniel as he came in the room. Uh, the friend she was getting high with, I guess Natasha said, "Oh, Heidi was molested as a child."
That no,
Um,
but that is Grady showing up.
oh, that's Grady showing up. Okay.
Yeah, that's young Grady showing up. Yeah.
Oh, well, even better. Okay, so that
Yeah,
proves
and
my
he
point.
might already know because old Grady may have told him.
Right, but that tracks with what I was about to say, which is now that basically everyone knows, everyone except Daniel.
Mhm.
Could it actually be the case that Grady wrote all of the letters? Old Grady. We see how Machiavellian he is.
Yes.
And the only reason Heidi believed it was her older self was because no one knew. However, that Heidi had no idea whether she would tell people in the future or not.
Yeah, and we also know from the last volume that their machine has a handwriting duplicator. Because
Right.
he
Yes.
specifically says,
So
write it on a
this
post-it
makes me
note
think
using handwrite sample, whatever. Yeah.
that
Well,
old Grady is the arch nemesis. He is the villain of the book. And I think if this is to take a heroic turn, it will be young Grady turning on old Grady.
yeah, and I think it also tracks too that when they get to the bunker, when they see their names like on the wall, and like something was pinned under their names, and all those are ripped down because I think we see old Grady tear all those down and see the letters that were written. Right? I think he
Yes.
saw the letters that were written and then wrote new ones based on that, based on what we saw there. I think that's entirely possible. I think that's on the board. And yeah, it definitely furthers that old Grady is the ostensible bad guy of the book.
Yeah, there's not really any question about that at this
Yeah.
point, unless you really believe, his ends justify his means.
Yeah, yeah.
But even when
Well, he also says at one
when
point, right?
yes, at one point it was like someone like calls him on it. He's like, "Yeah, baby."
Yeah,
It's like, what are you doing here, my guy?
but he's like, yeah, if we screw it up, you know what? We'll just go back again.
Well,
Like
that's true.
He throws that out there, like, hey, man, I'm trying. His whole thing is, I'm trying something different, and if it doesn't work, you know what? We'll go back and do it again. That is very. I don't want to call it. I don't want to call it.
I'm trying to find the one where he's in the back of the car on the phone, which I think would be what you would call issue 13.
I think so. Yeah. Well, no, that theory is very, again, I don't want to call it It's a Tomorrow. I want to call it Live, Die, Repeat. But you know, the Tom Cruise film, you know, but that same idea, right? Of we just keep iterating, we just keep going back until we get it right. And for old Grady to throw that out there totally nonchalantly, just being like, yeah, well, listen, his mindset is right. We did this once and everything got screwed up. So I came back. I'm going to try to fix it. And if we screw it up again, you know what? We'll just come back and you know, we've crossed off some variables. So we're going to go and try it again and see what happens from there. And it's like he feels he has almost like an infinite number of tries to get this right.
There's some oh man, there's some time travel thing I'm thinking of where just every time they try to change anything, it just gets darker and darker, and they cannot change it for good. And
well, yeah, I mean that's a lot of time travel stories because that plays
driving me crazy.
That plays on kind of the inherent hubris that time travel instills in people. The fact that I feel I've created this thing, so I have control over it. To change things to my quote unquote will or to make them better or whatever I think a version of better is. And every time you do it, it just gets worse and worse and worse. That's the morality play of a time travel story that so much science fiction is based on and utilizes. So yeah, I can't think of an example and I can't think of one either, but 100% that exists.
Yeah. So anyway, okay, getting to what you would call chapter 12, issue 13, the chronology one. I'm guessing you can guess how I felt about that. I was annoyed by the gimmick of working backward. Like the one I liked the most was the one page where it's her at the bar and it's just moving days backward as you go. So because once you get to the end of the page, you can just read it from bottom to top again. And appreciate everything they're doing here. But
see, I love this stuff, and this one isn't done as well. It's because you don't spend an equal amount of time on each time period. Whenever I see an issue like this, I think of one of my favorite single issue comics of all time, which I think I've mentioned here before a bunch. It is Grayson Futures End #1. It was an initiative that DC did towards the end of the New 52, where they imagined a dystopian future where where evil AI takes over the world and every totally not relevant now, but where every issue got a special one shot called Future's End, and they imagine what those characters would be some like 30 years into the existence of the New 52 DC universe. Anyway, that's too much explanation to say that this story, Grayson's Future's End, is
Tom King write that?
Written by Tom King. I believe it is his first.
Tim Seeley.
Him and King and Seeley, Tim Seeley were
they both have credits on my comic shop on that issue.
They're credited story creators all through the run of Grayson. Yeah. I believe during the run of Grayson, they actually handed off the actual scripts back and forth. In terms of, they had develop the story together, but hand the scripts off an actual writing of the panels and dialogue. But I believe this Grayson's Future's End issue is one of the first that Tom Kidd did on his own, even though Tim Seeley is still credited as a co-story credit. He wrote this on his own, art done by Stephen Mooney, and every single page. The first page starts and the next page says earlier, next page earlier, earlier, and it moves all the way back through the life of Dick Grayson to like pre-Robin days. Like that's how the story goes. It goes from this dystopian future where he's like working for Russia and KG Beast and all that. It takes it all the way back through his origins of the death of his parents at the circus. And every page takes you further back. And the way it's structured, and it's like so meticulous that every page you go back, it reveals information about things you had already read, which is the whole point of this, right? You're showing the reader something that you're going to reveal to them later because you've decided on this story structure. And that is like, I think that's like a near perfect storytelling issue in terms of its construction and thought process and layout. It is an incredible read. And that's obviously what they're trying to do here, right? They're starting with Heidi getting arrested. And some of that we already know, right? Because we know in the future she's a wanted fugitive. She's on the run. We see a little bit of her future, of their future selves, right? After the apocalypse has happened. So we know we know she's wanted for something. We know the information of her allegedly having killed her uncle who molested her. Right now we see through this that maybe that didn't quite happen, but we did know because we saw her try to or think about it. So we know that intent was there. We didn't actually see her do it. So her getting arrested, not totally out of the wild there. But as we jump back, we start seeing more and more and, revealing her conversations with her brother, with Grady, with all this stuff. And to the point where we even see that the three of them on the couch that we see at the end of the end of the first issue 11, right?
Yeah.
We see that's just a upper half of the page there, and it just says 20 days ago. So that's when that moment took place, and we're still jumping back further and further until we catch up to where we left off at the end of volume 2, which was her being knocked unconscious. Which I guess in this, we find out old Grady and old Natasha simulated a seizure. They triggered something to simulate a seizure.
Not really a seizure, which is why she medically has no symptoms of a seizure.
Yeah, well, she triggered one, and then they flew her to her uncle's. They killed him, simulated it so they were using, so the blood splatter would get on her and things like that. They set her up, and then they set off another seizure, a second seizure, and that takes us back to the end, which is 89 days ago, aka 3 months ago. So that takes us back to effectively exactly where we left off at the end of volume 2. So we see the passage of time through Heidi's story there. And said, I like that kind of stuff. I like when creators take those kinds of narrative swings. Again, I don't think this one is 100% as tight, but I like the presentation. I like them trying to do that. I like when creators mix it up like that. So I always appreciate when they take a swing like this, especially in a story that is explicitly playing with the idea of time. I like things being presented out of order because I like seeing the construction. I like seeing what their thought process is in terms of how we're going to do all this information. How are we going to reconcile the things that we've already shown you that we haven't told you yet?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's great. I mean, okay. Yes. I also love this depiction. I have read Grayson, but I never read that Future 10 Grayson because I thought all of those dumb lenticulars were
that's true. Lenticular cover, ridiculous. A lot of them, they vary in quality greatly. You don't have to know anything about Grayson,
other than who Nightwing is. Yeah,
if you know Nightwing is, well, I guess you do have to know that in the story of Grayson, he has faked his death, and he is no longer Nightwing. He is now an agent of a spy. He's a spy.
He's James Bond.
Effectively, yeah, he's a spy for an organization called Spiral. But as long as you know the history of Dick Grayson, who was Robin, then became Nightwing, and all that stuff, anyone can read it. And even if you don't, just reading it and appreciating the construction of the story, I think it's fantastic. First time I met Tom King, I got him to sign it and tell him that it's such a fun issue. It's again, it is one of my favorite single issue story comics of all time. That like I can just go back, pull up, and read and go through and kind of marvel at it. It's so fun to read. So I
Yeah.
think to me
Well,
that's the pinnacle of this type of storytelling, of this
well,
type of
I'll give you
this type
another
of
one
reverse
that
chronology.
I've never read quite like it, which is not a single issue, but an arc in the new 52 Flash, which big surprise, Flash does stuff with time travel.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they can't help it. They're always doing stuff, crazy stuff with time travel. That's, I
After
think, not even internally consistent within the Flash character. If
they
you read 30
try,
years worth of Flash,
they
oh, they
try,
try
they
to
try,
retcon and
they try.
explain things, but
But
this was probably in the
sorry.
30 to 40 issue range
Okay.
of New 52 Flash. This is Robert Vidini and Van Jensen writing, and they tell the story of, I believe it's Savitar, who's like the corrupted future Barry Allen,
Mhm.
and it shows him going back to the point where his life diverged into what he became, and you cut back and forth between Savitar moving backward in time through the events that led to his creation while you're following your regular story arc with Barry until they finally collide at the same time at the end of the story arc. Beautifully done. Like that's one where like the pitch document for, that like 6 or 12 issue run had like all kinds of red yarn all over it of like,
That absolutely
we got to do
that's
this, this, and this, and
total crazy person
uh,
board. Definitely. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, and to me it was one of the really gratifying ones because I don't think that was the creative team that started the run. And so, that's probably 30s and 40s, especially in the New 52, especially a character like the
Well,
Flash,
I was going
probably
to
when a
say,
lot of people are starting to tune out.
well, also most of those books around 35, 36, a lot of them changed teams just
Yes.
from a creative standpoint. So a lot of them broke at that point to bring a new team. I want to say it was around 35 or 36. So if it's in that zone there, a lot of the, some of them stayed through, obviously, Batman stayed true mostly through, but
I'm
I think
looking at it now.
one
That
of them was
was their
changing.
first run on the Flash. That was
and
like
and
they came in, they kicked the
and
door
did
down
that. Yes.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like that was a time when Batgirl changed creative teams and did Batgirl Burnside. That's also when Nightwing stopped and Grayson started right around that time frame. So that makes sense that you'd bring in a new team, whole new team, whole new idea, and then for them to start their arc with something that ambitious and do it that well. How long was that arc? Do you have it up there? How many issues did that run?
I
That specific one?
It is hard for me to tell. It is because that villain is on the cover of 3 trades in a row. So that could
Sure,
be
sure, sure.
issues 30 through 40, which would include Annual 3,
Hmm.
the Secret Origins, and the Flash's Future End.
Okay.
But I'm guessing there are a few, like if you trimmed it down to just that story arc, I bet it's
Mhm.
probably 8 issues.
Sure, sure,
Um,
sure. Which is, I mean, that takes, I mean, an immense amount of planning.
oh my gosh,
Between,
yeah.
I mean,
And to make it work. Like,
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
a lot of times you see ideas like that, you're like, really cool idea. Wish they could have nailed it, but this time
yeah,
they nailed
yeah,
it.
yeah. You can, I think
And
when
having
it
two
doesn't,
writers on it, probably
yeah.
helps.
Well, I would imagine they wrote one direction, one went the other, probably.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and when it doesn't work, I think is when you can see the seams and you can see where it doesn't quite mesh and doesn't work as well. But something like that's really cool. I should check that out. I didn't continue. Flash is never a character I've read a whole bunch of. It's probably one of the few characters you've read a lot more than I have overall because I've only read. I just haven't run a whole bunch. I've read like essential
There's only
Flash
so many
stories.
hours in the day.
Yeah, I've only read essential stuff, but
But I will say,
New
most
52
of your
wasn't one that
favorite
I read a
writers
lot
have
of.
done something on the Flash at some point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've read a decent amount of older
and
Flash stuff. So and I read
true or
like Rebirth
false,
stuff, but
Van Jensen, who co-wrote this, also co-wrote Bylines and Blood.
he did. Yes, indeed. Yep, yep,
Okay,
yep,
so
yep, yep, yep.
Van
So
Jensen, we've talked about on the podcast, so I
mhm,
admire his writing, and he was very nice when we offered him a spot on the podcast. We did get Erica Schultz,
mhm.
co-writer of Violence and Blood. He was very kind. He did write back. He was simply too busy, and when you look at his CV, you understand why.
Yeah, he's got a lot more than just writing going on there. So, but that's
Yeah.
really cool. I'll check that out because again, I love stories like that because again, I like to see things. I just mentioned talking about seeing the seams. I think when the seams are obvious, that's when it's bad. I like being able to be in the story and try to find how it was stitched together. I want to see what their thinking was in terms of okay, you're revealing this part first of this thing that happened an issue ago, and then you're doing the next thing that reveals something that happened that sort of connective tissue. I love having that stuff kind of bouncing around in my head when I read an issue. So I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I love getting that. And you kind of have all your answers there, right? And the way that sets up, again, the way that sets up for the trade that I'm reading in, that takes you into chapter 13, which for you is issue 14, which is the end of the arc. That takes you back into an incredibly plot heavy story, right? Because now we're caught up to the timeline. Heidi's been arrested. That is when our two Natashas end up meeting. We meet the girl that the person that Heidi had hooked up with before she got arrested. Everything kind of converges, and it ends obviously with Heidi writing out her confession about the bunker. And again, for you, that's the acceleration towards the end of the arc, and you finish reading, and then you're done. For me, reading in the trade, or anyone reading in the trade, you get that, and then you get the release on the end. Then you get our interstitial story as chapter 14. You get the look back at what the world was. I'm still, it's still kind of kicking around, just like how that changes the relationship to that issue, which I think we both really like, but it's impossible to view it on equal terms because of how we read it and what we had already read or hadn't read in your case when you came to that issue. That's
Yeah, well,
fascinating.
for what it's worth, I have uh just as since we've been talking, I have reached out to him, invited him on the podcast, and I've said, if you're too busy to come on the podcast, please at least give me a line to read about the change in sequence here because we'd only
Yeah.
discovered it while we were recording.
Yeah, that is
Um,
fast. Again, stuff like that is always especially changing the order. It's like, so like we actually just talked about this, right? With letter 44. We just talked about this, how they pulled all their interstitials and put them in their own separate trade right before the end. You know, and
yes.
and in doing so, the last interstitial comes in the middle of the issues that are collected for the last volume. So you actually, in that case, you read the last interstitial before you read some of the other previously printed material. So if you read them in the initial trades, you got them in that order that they were intending to do. When that book came out in the deluxe edition or in the compendium, the deluxe edition is the way that we framed it, which is straight chronological. They broke it down into thirds, and the compendium obviously is everything in order. But in that case, they decided to do that. We talked about it with time before time. Maybe it's something with stories about time travel that they feel that they can mess around with the order of issues, and maybe because those stories are have a sense of more fitting for those kind of interstitial stories. But they did the same sort of thing where they pulled out all those standalones and gave them to you later at the end of the story, because I guess for someone reading in trade, they didn't want to break up the reading experience. Because maybe the understanding is if you're reading month to month, you get those breaks. You're already kind of on a break waiting for an issue. But to do it here and to just take one issue and to flip its position from before these set of issues to after. Yeah, I'm kind of desperate to get at least an answer on that. I really want to know what went into that, and maybe it was nothing more than that. We thought it was a good idea, but to me, it feels like there's some level of intention there that they wanted to convey to the reader that they thought in this format, in the collected format, this would be a better, or in their mind, maybe more optimum reading experience.
Well, or perhaps, I mean, yes, like there
Yeah.
had to be some tectonic shift in thinking to say
a choice
this
was
is going
made.
to be the better reading
Yeah,
experience.
yes, a choice was made. Someone made the choice. Someone decided we're going to change this. And I'm dying to know why, what the reasoning was. Even if it was more just that we thought it was better. Again, someone made a choice, and I want to hear what that is. Because yeah, for me it totally works at the end, and it would because I had done it the perspective reading this before reading those batch of issues is just it would actually feel strange to me.
Yeah.
I like it as a button at the end, and as opposed to what you said as like a soft launch in the beginning. I think, and maybe that's a testament to the issue and the way that this trade is set up, that it can work either way.
I think we both agree it doesn't belong in the middle, though.
Oh no, of course not.
So,
Yeah.
you know.
There's no break there. But the fact that you can read it before this batch of issues or at the end, and it's still effective, it still works. You still get the information that they're trying to get across. That's still conveyed to the reader, and nothing is lost in that translation of position. I think that's a testament to what they did in that one issue, and what they were trying to do of just getting across what the world is like, or what the world was like, in that future timeline.
Yeah. By the way, I did a quick Google and double check.
Mm-hmm.
Those are issues 30 to 35 in New 52 Flash. If anyone is looking for bonus reading, the convergence is in issue 30. Future Barry Allen, Future Flash is 20 years out. In issue 31, he's 16 years out. Issue 32, 12 years out, then 7 years out, then 5.5 years out. And then it keeps saying, anytime it jumps back to present time Barry Allen in the issues, it will say Central City now. And in the 35th issue, it says Central City now, but you're seeing Future Flash there. And so now you know that they've collided. It's like, God, they nailed it.
Yeah. That's cool. I'll check that out.
Super fun issues. So anyway, those are all of my notes. I did not know we would have this huge diversion into the reading order, but I'm so curious. Anyone listening, I assume people are like getting trades from Hoopla and something, which means my reading was probably the minority reading.
At this point, yeah. I mean, because with a series like this, the most probably easily available is going to be in the 4 trades. So yeah, that is fascinating to think that, again, the way that I think for every creator out there, there's an understanding that the largest audience you're going to get to read your book is going to be in the collected edition. I think that's something that every creator, I whether it's talking on this show or at conventions or other interviews you talk about, they understand that the single issues have a certain amount of reach, and they understand what that's going to be. But when it's collected in trade, that's when the greatest opportunity for the most amount of people to read it. So in a way, that becomes for lack of a better word, definitive reading order.
Yes,
that becomes the way to read it. And
well, I mean, I'm having shades of Gospel by Will Morris here, where we had different experiences reading single issue and trade, but the ending
that is an actual like content change, which is
right. But it was the author's final word on it.
It is
what went in the trade.
It's a cousin of that, and actually, I'm thinking about. I didn't think of this earlier. The Sandman collects stories out of order as well, because there are so many standalone one-shots, interstitials, because that's the nature of that book, that there are all these arcs that are collected, and then oftentimes an issue here, an issue there, 3 issues here, like a mini arc, those get collected later on. And even though I own all the single issues, even though I own the Sandman in multiple different volume versions, I've only ever read in trade. Like, I have all the single issues. I've never actually read them all the way through. So even that book, I've only experienced in the order they're saying what they figure is optimal in terms of combining and condensing these story arcs. So, I can't believe I didn't think of that sooner, but the idea of reordering and rearranging things for, again, the most amount of people to experience the work. It's something, it's something kind of wild to think about, that those kind of decisions are still being made after something's already being published. That a trade paperback, a collection, isn't just republishing of material. Like you said with Will Morrison Gospel, there's a chance to change something. Again, not just like fixing letters and typos and things like that or color correction, like actually make a content change, actually change something that the reader experiences. And even when you come to a trade like this, just shifting the position of some issues or one issue or whatever it is, and saying this is the way that I now think is the best way to read it, the most optimal way to read it, versus what we did months ago when this stuff was coming out in single issue. Like in hindsight, now that the story is done or the arc is done, this is the way that I want people to read it. And that's cool to me, that it's like it's still a living document. That it's still, that just because it comes out, it's not finished.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Um, yeah, the only other example of this I'm thinking of is um, when we talked to Kyle Starks about Assassination, and he had written 30-page scripts for every issue, and only found out after submitting the second issue that
Yeah,
Image was like, only the first one's 30. You have
yeah,
24. And he essentially had to cut a whole story arc out of it.
yeah. Hmm.
And
That's right. That's
now
right.
I think because of, had he been, drawing all of that himself and, had it all, socked away, ready to go to the publisher, perhaps that would have gotten dumped in the trade, but it probably wasn't worth going back to Erica Henderson and having her redraw all that to add to the trade.
Yeah, yeah.
But it would have
That's
been
a lot
cool
of
to know
extra
what
stuff.
was
Yeah.
in there, and that's the type of thing where you can really leverage the trade once you get there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, oftentimes the trade is stuff is allows for that extra material, right? That back matter stuff of here's what the script looked like, and you can see how it may have changed and things like that. But that is a big ask, right? We're talking about adding, you know, 6 to 8 extra pages lopped off of every script, down to
Yeah,
22 or 24, whatever they're going with their standard there. That's a lot of pages to lot. That's effectively an entire issue. It's a whole other issue that's just gone. That he doesn't get to do because yeah, they kind of miscommunication there. So yeah, what were those stories? What could that have been? And yeah, if there was a chance to go back and just like, hey, here's a whole bonus issue of something, that only happens sometimes if something is done but doesn't get published, you know,
right.
versus like, we're going to make this new for the trade. That's oftentimes a step too far. But I would welcome it though. And I think you would too. If something was like, yeah, here's the story that you got, and here was extra stuff that we decided to throw in there that we had ideas for, but this is the only place it's going to be. I welcome all that kind of stuff. I welcome the trade to be its own special thing beyond just,
And I have to say that I
so I
think
welcome
that's
single issues that way too.
well, I
Brubaker and
think
Phillips add stuff to the single issue that aren't in the train because I want you to buy that. So I like it. I like it going in both directions. I like getting extras. I like
agreed.
each of them being unique. I like each
Yes.
of them being
I
a
like
different reading
rewarding
experience.
you purchasing in different formats. And I
Yes,
gotta
yes, yes, yes.
say, in terms of having the extra stuff thrown in, I know that you and I aren't big on this, but I do think that's the bonus of being like a Kickstarter comic person.
Mhm.
Is that, a lot of times there's stretch goals and you get bonus material or scripts or things like
Yep.
that thrown in. Um,
Work in progress stuff. See, yeah, you can see the evolution of a page or something like that. Yeah, yeah. So I love seeing all that stuff. Whether or not I read through it every time, at some point I'll flip through it because I'm curious. I'm curious about process.
yeah.
Yep.
Um, anyway, well, thank you for listening. And for the next episode, which is volume 4, read the rest of the issues, which is
Yes.
15 to 19.
15 to 19. Yep.
Yep. Man,
Yeah,
finally
that's it.
got it.
Yeah, nailed it. Good
Even though I
job.
started saying 14, I knew it
Yes.
in my head and I was wrong. So anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for bearing with us. And hopefully the next trade is straightforward and we can get right into the material rather than the meta conversation about it. But I did have a blast talking about all of that.
That
Um,
was wild to find out live as you're recording. That
yeah.
truly was wild. That's
It was
crazy.
like there's probably 5 seconds of stunned silence when I interviewed Will Morris,
Yeah.
and he was holding up the last page from the trade, and I was holding my single issue like, what? What, like, is it different in the UK?
Yeah.
I was frantically thinking like, what could possibly have happened here? And it's shame on him that he didn't immediately say like, oh, you're reading single issue. There was a different ending. So anyway,
Still bummed I missed that, but that was that was listen, fun to discover there that they've made that choice, because it leads to so many other questions about the reading experience, which is something that you and I are all about. How you experience stories, not just what's on the page, but how you as the reader intake the story.
yes, yeah.
And something like that is can jumpstart a conversation like that. Is so fun.
So anyway, find us storydarks.com, Blue Sky Storydarks, Instagram Storydarks, occasionally Facebook on Storydarks, and we will see you back here next Thursday for the conclusion of The Bunker.
Peace.